Have you heard about critical race theory? I'm guessing you probably have. Critical race theory originated in the United States in the late 20th century. It holds that the most important thing about you is your race, the color of your skin. That's who you are, not your behavior, not your values, not your environment, your race. Here it is in the words of Richard Delgado and Jean Stefancic, two leading proponents. Critical race theory questions the very foundations of liberal order, including equality theory, legal reasoning, Enlightenment rationalism, and the neutral principles of constitutional law. It does this because critical race theory proponents assume racism is present everywhere and always, and they look for it critically until they find it. And they always find it. It has to be there because that's how the imperial European powers, and then America, set things up. In my comparative study, I will examine how Green Book and Fresh Off the Boat portray non-white racial identity and discrimination in their respective historical and social settings. Understanding the cultural context of these works is key to analyzing how race is represented in these films. Set in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement, the Green Book reflects the deep-rooted racial discrimination in the U.S. Despite the legal abolition of slavery, racism and segregation remained widespread. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 marked significant progress, signaling the shift towards racial equality. The Green Book, a guide for Black travelers, symbolized this progress. It was no longer needed. This era represented a correction of historical wrongs and highlighted the drive for equality, bringing the U.S. closer to democratic ideals. Fresh Off the Boat is set in 1990s, a period when Asian American communities, particularly those who immigrated in the 1970s and 1980s, were becoming more prominent in the U.S. society. This decade marked growing conversations around multiculturalism, immigration, and identity, as well as the increasing visibility of Asian Americans, especially in urban areas. The show focuses on Taiwanese American experience, highlighting the tension between maintaining cultural heritage and assimilating into mainstream American life. Now that we've set the stage, let's dive into the similarity between these two works in portraying non-white racial identity and discrimination. In Green Book, the director uses close-up shots of food to highlight the stereotype that Black people love fried chicken in the minds of white people. Morgan Anderson, as the host, serves fried chicken and other dishes commonly referred to as Black people's food, including collard greens, grits, etc. During the 1960s, fried chicken became the symbol of Black people's food because it provided the energy needed for the hard labor of slavery, yet it was affordable. We can clearly see the discomfort on Dr. Shirley's face, but out of politeness, he still accepts this supposedly thoughtful gesture. The director uses leading lines and symmetrical composition to convey the orderly nature of white aristocratic society while guiding the audience gaze from the white people seated at the table in the foreground to Black waiters in the background, walking out from both sides carrying food. This can be interpreted as the director using the passing of food to emphasize racial and class equality. In Fresh Off the Boat, the director also uses close-up shots of food to highlight the racial discrimination white people have towards Asians in terms of eating habits. When Eddie, the new student, opened his lunchbox in the canteen, he's immediately mocked by his white classmates. They refer to the noodles as worms.
Oh my god, Ying Ming's eating worms.
And the image of worms as a primitive source of sustenance suggests the stereotype that white people still see Chinese people as living in a primitive and backwards environment. This reflects the lack of respect for the Asian community. When Eddie returned to sit next to his Black classmates, the Black student said this:
"The white people didn't welcome you with open arms,"
implying that he, too, is excluded by the white classmates, while also expressing disdain for Asians. This small community within the school highlights the existing racial conflicts and discriminatory systems among children. In Green Book, the director uses spatial division through lines to reflect the segregation and power differences between Black and white people. This is illustrated when Don Shirley asks for the restroom, and to his surprise, the host leads him to a restroom outside the hall, in the middle of the pines. When the host first calls out to Shirley, the composition is centered. In the next shot, however, the central axis shifts significantly to the left, reducing the space on Shirley's sides, while the space on the right, where the white house is, becomes much larger. The background is bright and filled with a group of white people, visually emphasizing Shirley's isolation as a black man, facing opposition not only from the host, but also from the entire white community behind him. Additionally, in the film, black people are not allowed to dine at upscale restaurants, try on new clothes, or stay at certain hotels, among other restrictions. The director also uses several frame composition to highlight the struggles black people face under racial discrimination. The director uses negative space composition to highlight Asians' isolation. The left side of the frame is left entirely empty, creating a stark contrast with the right side, where Eddie sits on the steps, eating his lunch alone on the grounds. This use of space visually emphasizes Eddie's marginalization, both physically and socially, reflecting his exclusion from the larger group.
This is nice.
Moreover, when Jessica discusses a new mural with other homeowners, the director uses a foreground composition to showcase her position as the only Asian in the predominantly white community, highlighting her lack of recognition. When Jessica asks her questions, the camera focuses on the other white residents in the foreground, emphasizing her sense of alienation in the white-dominated environment. Jessica's expression appears confused and uneasy, contrasting sharply with the smiles and confident expression of the others around her. This composition places Jessica in the separated states within the frame, underscoring her identity as Asian and her inability to fully integrate into the group. While both films share these powerful similarities, they also differ significantly in how they approach the theme of race and identities. Let's explore these differences next. In Green Book, the director uses the imagery of a mirror to reflect Shirley's internal struggle with his identity. A pushing shot actively draws the audience closer to Shirley, allowing us to feel his psychological turmoil and confusion. This symbolizes a tug-of-war he faces regarding his identity. On one hand, he wants to embrace his identity as a black artist, but on the other hand, he is oppressed by the racial discrimination of white society. In this scene, Dr. Shirley's performance can be seen as an expression of his fractured sense of self, which set the stage for the emotional outburst in the rain later on.
So if I'm not black enough, and if I'm not white enough, and if I'm not man enough, then tell me, Tony, what am I?
As a black pianist, he is often forced to play a role in white society, but deep down, he has not fully integrated into his role. He longs for respect, but under white oppression, he loses himself, creating confusion and unease about his own identities. In Fresh Off the Boat, Eddie's family has a deep understanding of their own culture. Although Eddie desperately wants to fit into American life, he still struggles with cultural conflicts at school and continues to search for his own cultural identity. The director uses the repetition of key phrases to show Eddie's commitment to his Chinese heritage and his desire to protect his cultural roots. When Eddie refuses to participate in a China-themed exhibition, his mother tells him,
"A wall you can see from space. China, birthplace of Kung Fu. China, gunpowder, the compass, gambling. China, China, China!"
They're like the pandas.
Later, Eddie repeats this phrase to the white kids who mock China.
You know what's cool? A wall you can see from space. China. We got 5,000 years of history, dog.
This action not only shows his affirmation of his own cultural identity, but also reflects his process of regaining self-respect and confidence in the face of external oppression.
China.
I didn't think he was listening.
By comparing Green Book and Fresh Off the Boat, we can see that although these two works are set in different historical periods, they both profoundly depict the issue of non-white racial identity and discrimination. Green Book uses a serious narrative and strong visual contrast to show the racial segregation and oppression of the 1960s, while Fresh Off the Boat uses the humor to explore the cultural conflicts and identity struggles of Asian immigrants in the 1990s. Both works, in their unique ways, highlight the enduring challenges of racial discrimination and the complexities of the cultural assimilation.